Namaste. Welcome to the first talk of our series, talks on the Gita, on the Bhagavad Gita, actually. So we get the full name. The Bhagavad Gita is a part of a great epic poem called the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata has 100,000 verses. The Gita, however, is only 700. The Mahabharata is a record of the great Indian war, Mahabharata, which took place, destroyed virtually the entire Kshatriya caste, and brought about a devastation that took incredible long time for the land of India to recover from. It was fought in a place called Kurukshetra. Today, that is in the modern state of Haryana, and it isn't far from Delhi. And there you can still go to the battlefield. You go outside the town, there is just a small hill, almost a hillock, that you can climb up, and there you'll see this vast expanse before you that was the battlefield. Interestingly enough, on one left side there's a forest, and on one of the right side there's a forest. So if you think of the trees as the soldiers, you sort of have a good picture of that time when this important dialogue took place. Arjuna, the great warrior, who was on the side of the righteous ones called the Pandavas, was in a chariot on that hillock with Krishna, who is considered a full avatar, a full incarnation of God. But that's not the subject now for us. But Krishna was seated there in the chariot. Arjuna looked and saw that on both sides, the so-called good ones and the bad ones, relatives. Not just relatives, great spiritual teachers that Arjuna had studied with. And yet some were on one side, some on the other, and they were planning to kill each other. If they were successful, it'd mean they would all die. If they were unsuccessful, still a lot of them would die. So Arjuna was horrified at this. And he realized he was the one who was to make the first move that would begin the battle. If he didn't make that move, there'd be no battle. So he spoke to Krishna at length and explained why he felt it would be utterly wrong, truly sinful, for him to fight with those people and to even begin this war. So he finally said, I will not fight. That's rather simple. By the way, I'm using the translation of Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood because this is perhaps the best in its English for us Americans to consider and use. It's the first version I ever read, and it absolutely changed my life. So there's a fondness on my part about the entire text. So anyhow, he said, I will not fight. And then Krishna, who, by the way, was not going to fight, only to drive his chariot, because Krishna wanted to be neutral to both sides. Now, Arjuna wanted to be neutral to both sides, And you'd say, well, Krishna is doing it, why can't he? But they have a very interesting uh, expression in Latin, Old Latin, Imperial Latin. Quod licet Iovi, non est licet bovi. What God is permitted, the cattle are not permitted. So we could put it the other way. What the cattle are permitted, what the common run is, the higher ones are not. So having this perspective, he said, I will not fight. Then Krishna begins. Now we truly are beginning our Gita consideration as far as the wisdom goes. Krishna says, your words are wise, Arjuna, but your sorrow is for nothing. Already we have a lesson. Words may be wise, but they may not be wisdom. Therefore, we have to be very careful, since we are ourselves extremely skilled in talking ourselves into doing what we want to do and talking ourselves out of things that really we don't want to do, so that we have our reasons or our excuses for acting or not acting. So we have to be very careful. If you saw Disney's Alice in Wonderland, you may remember that Alice sings a song that says, I often give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. So, no matter how the words sound, it's the effect that's going to matter. And so he says, though your words are wise, your hesitation, yes, your sorrow, your sort of premature grief for the death of all these people is for nothing. Why? Now we come to this is the first great teaching. The truly wise mourn neither for the living nor for the dead. That's a shock, isn't it? Because we're used to this. People die, we grieve. Or people that we love have troubles in their life and we grieve. But he says the truly wise do not grieve for them. They do not mourn for them. Now that sounds very stoic and hard-hearted, but he'll explain. There are no dead, you see. And even the living are just presently in a little time and space area. That is one of millions they have been in. And they have all lived many times and they have died many times. And yet they reappear. So, he then says, there was never a time when I did not exist. And let's think of Krishna speaking as God. In other words, God is infinite. God never came into being. God is eternal. And therefore, so are we, because our self and God are in a unified existence, though we are finite and God is infinite. The wave, you can certainly say, is the ocean. But the wave can't say, I am the ocean. But the ocean can say, I am the wave. All right. There was never a time when I did not exist, nor you nor any of these kings, nor is there any future in which we shall cease to be. In other words, in every life we take on a costume, and at the end of the life, we take it off. And we then realize, wait a minute, that wasn't me at all. And why was I so worried about death? Why did I resist death so much? Because I didn't really die. The lesser part of me, just the clothing of me, was laid aside. Nor is there any future in which we shall cease to be. So there is really only one moment, the eternal moment, where the true essential being of us exists. Just as the dweller in this body passes through childhood, youth, and old age, so at death, he merely passes into another kind of body. This is it. You put on another set of clothes, and people may say, oh, that's really nice. But they don't say, well, who are you? Because they know you who are inside it. So then, that's what we're doing. We're just changing our clothes. He says, the wise are not deceived by that. Because, of course, we do. We do let ourselves be deceived. All right. Feelings of heat and cold, pleasure and pain are caused by the contact of the senses with their objects. So now he's talking about what goes on even before death. They come and they go, never lasting long. You must accept them. Now, obviously, you've got to see a little bit of something in their background, and that is the law of karma. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, like Sir Isaac Newton tells us. So, everything you do, every act you do, then comes to fruition as another action that reflects that. And that's how it is. If I slap someone, it's because they slapped someone in a previous life. If someone slaps me, I slapped someone in a previous life. Therefore, Solomon said, what is it that is done? That which has already been done. In other words, there's an action that produces a reaction in another kind of action that produces a reaction, and it goes on and on and on and on. In the Orthodox Jewish prayer book, there's a section that says that the great Rabbi Hillel was walking by a river. And of all things, a skull came floating down the river. And he looked at the skull and said, you drowned someone in a previous life, and someone has now drowned you. And those who have now drowned you shall be drowned in their future life. That's the way it works. So if we understand this, then we say, well, what am I supposed to pay attention to? He says, a serene spirit accepts pleasure and pain with an even mind and is unmoved by either. Why? Because he knows it's temporary, it's going to end. It hurts now, but it's going to stop. It feels good now, but that's going to stop. I had a friend, a highly intelligent and very sensitive woman, that told me that almost from childhood she had this problem when she was in a situation that she really liked, such as a social situation with people she liked. Or if she went to some kind of a party and it was really a nice party, she would be in the middle of it and be enjoying it, and suddenly she would think, but it's all going to end. And then it won't be anymore. And then she would get depressed and she would get sad and stay that way clear until it ended. Well, this is something that should obviously not bother us because it's the way it's going to be. When you go to sleep at night, you know you're going to get up in the morning. And when you get up in the morning, you know you're going to sleep at night, unless the big sleep of death intervenes. So we just see this is how it is. We learn how to look at it objectively because it never really affects the true us, only the outside us that is part of the dream. We are dreaming in a dream. God is dreaming the creation, and we are dreaming inside the creation along with Him. But when the dream ends, then we almost can't say it's gone because it never existed anyway. It was only an appearance. So he says, that which is non existent can never come into being, and that which is can never cease to be. Those who've known the inmost reality, and there's the catch, not just a little inner reality, oh, I understand my mind, I understand the way it works, but the inmost reality that is the spirit, the Atma, the self. Those who have known that know the nature of is and is not. And nobody else really does. That reality which pervades the universe is indestructible. No one has power to change the changeless. We would say, well, but that's God. So are you, God. In other words, the reality of your reality is indestructible and it is changeless. So you need have no fear, and you need not have grief if you think you've lost something, because you still have yourself. You still have your everlasting life. Bodies are said to die, but that which possesses the body is eternal. You see. Now there's a saying, even in life we are in the midst of death. That is to remind us that we do have mortality. But that could be too morbid. And we must also forget that even in the midst of death, we are in life because we are life itself. And therefore, why is there grief? Sri Ramakrishna told an interesting story. There was a man who had a son that he was very, very attached to. And the son died. And to his wife's surprise, he didn't grieve, he didn't shed any tears. And she said, why aren't you having any reaction? He said, well, last night I dreamed I had 10 sons, and they all died. So who am I going to grieve for? Because again, this too is a dream. It's just a more stable dream than the ones we have at night. Therefore, he said, you must fight. In other words, you must understand your karma has brought this to you. You have to fight, and not only that, you will fight. Later on, he'll explain this. In other words, if you say, I'm not going to fight, take my chariot off the battlefield, the moment you start to move, on both sides, people will crawl out and mock you, call you a coward, call you insulting names, even laugh at you, and you'll get furious and you'll turn around and say, all right, I'll kill them all. We have to understand our own weaknesses. So he continues, some say this Atman is slain, and others call it the slayer. They know nothing. That's a really intense statement. But you see, the only knowledge that is real is the highest knowledge, and all the lesser knowledge really isn't much of anything. So we have to keep intent on the higher. All right, let's go back to the beginning. Some say this Atman is slain, others call it this lair, they know nothing. How can it slay, or who shall slay it? In other words, it can't happen. Therefore, then he says, even greater wisdom, which is advice to Arjuna and advice to us. For we too are sitting on the battlefield of life, and we too have to make our way through that battle. And then there is another, even higher thing. We're in the battle for higher consciousness. The yogi is warring on this inner battlefield of his own conscious and unconscious mind. And that's not an easy war, and we would like to shirk it and be like Arjuna and make some kind of excuse, but we've got to fight it. We'll be forced to, because it's our nature to wake up, break the shell of the egg, and live in the new life. Know this, Atman, unborn, undying, never ceasing, never beginning, deathless, birthless. How can it die the death of the body? Well, it can't. Knowing it birthless. Now, this is what's so important. He says knowing, not believing, not thinking. Knowing it birthless, knowing it deathless, knowing it endless, forever unchanging. How are you going to do that? By yoga alone. You have to become a yogi. In the 18th chapter, the final chapter of the Gita, the whole purpose is going to be spoken to us. It's the real message. All these other things are supportive details. The real message is where he says, therefore, be a yogi. And the only way to know it's birthless and deathless and endless and forever unchanging is to experience your own self in meditation. And as you do it, this eternal consciousness remains in your mind a little more when you come out of meditation. It's like having dye in a vat, and you have a cloth, and you dip it in, and it's a little bit color, and you dip it again, and it's more color, and you keep going until you get it with the full strength of the color. And that's what meditation is all about. People would like to say, why don't I come out of the first meditation enlightened? Well, because that's just not the nature of the way things work. But again, knowing it birthless, knowing it deathless, knowing it endless, forever unchanging. Dream not you do the deed of the killer. And also don't dream that so much that is in your life is that important and is that crucial. And you think, oh, without that, I'd die. Well, without that, I couldn't go on. You will go on. Swami Trigunatitananda, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, came to America and he lived in San Francisco. And he established a Vedanta society there, and he also established an ashram there. And American people interested in the monastic life came to live there. And he wrote a big motto that he put on the wall for everyone to see every day and remember. And it was simply this: do or die, but you won't die. But have that idea. All right, if it kills me, I'll do it. And then when you do it, it makes you more alive than you ever were before, and more immortal than you ever were before. And then you'll realize I cannot die. I met a wonderful man, a wonderful, wonderful man in northern India, in the holy city of Haridwar. He was very old. He was very ill. He had spent his life. He was a very rich man. He inherited tremendous wealth, and he spent it all on other people. When I met him, he was living in a tiny little room. He only had two changes of clothes, and he was sponsoring a school, a free school for village children. And he also had a school for Brahmin boys who could learn to become pujaris, those who would perform the worship in temples or in people's houses on special days, and that would be how they'd make their livelihood. So his whole life was others. So he came into this little Krishna temple, which he had built, and we sat there and we spoke. And quite a few times in our conversation, he lost his train of thought and he'd say something. He was much worse than I am. And then it'd be at a standstill. And he would laugh. And he did this several times. And he looked at me and said, the mind is going, the eyes are going, the ears are going. In time, the body is going. And then I tell you, this joy suddenly came out of him. It wasn't just an act, it wasn't just a person expressing conviction. He had knowledge of this, obviously. And with this wonderful joy, he said to me, but I shall never die. And so it is. That's the goal of life, to know that we're alive. Worn out garments are shed by the body. Worn out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. New bodies are donned by the dweller like garments. So it is, and the timer tells me that's the end. Thank you for your patience. Forgive my rather scattered presentation, which we hope will be improved by our next talk. So, Namaste Ji. See you then.